hamburgers, 55 fries, 55 tacos, 55 pies.
We all know McD's, BK, Wendy's, and Taco Bell, but here are some of the ones that just couldn't keep up. 10 fast food chains that no longer exist.
Okay, that'll be $680.
Okay.
Burger Queen.
If we pass a McDaniel's or a Burger Queen, let's hop out.
Nope, you didn't hear that wrong. If Burger King had a sister, this franchise would have to be the place. From 1956 all the way until 1981, Burger Queen was responsible for slinging burgers all over the U.S. Harold and Helen Kite were quick to join the fast food boom that was spreading across the nation and opened their first store in Winter Haven, Florida. While they were successful in getting their brand off the ground, 5 years later they sold their business and the franchise moved to Kentucky and started a real boom for the Queen. For the next 20 years, the chain enjoyed massive success as they slowly pushed their store count to 50 locations across multiple states.
This is my home.
By 1981, that number had grown to just shy of 200 outlets nationwide. That same year, for some reason, Burger Queen decided to change their name to Druthers. It was a puzzling move, and less than 10 years later, the chain was ready to throw in the towel. Through a private sale, all but a few of these locations were slowly converted to Dairy Queens. A few held on throughout the years, but eventually in 2019, the last Druthers, or what was formerly known as Burger Queen, closed for good.
It's not fair.
Carrol's.
The ultimatum is a cheeseburger stuffed inside a cheeseburger.
Have you ever heard the name Tasty Freeze? It was one of the first franchising fast food restaurants in the nation, and many of today's brands look to them for inspiration as they started out. Our next entry is no different. In fact, many people consider it to be a direct offshoot. Carrol's opened their first store under the proprietorship of Herb Slotnick, who began opening franchises in the early 1960s. Carrol's operated out of small diner-like buildings, and they focused on serving familiar favorites quickly. Hamburgers were a big seller, and who could argue with a mere 15-cent price tag?
Damn good deal.
The restaurant remained a staple in the fast food environment until 1975, when they decided to close their doors. This isn't a cut-and-dry, sad ending, however. The Carrol's company would go on to become the major franchisor for an up-and-coming chain known as Burger King. The company's responsible for over 1,000 Burger King locations. Even though you can't stop in for a hamburger at your local Carrol's anymore, take solace in the idea that the failure of a franchise helped another climb the fast food mountain to success. Dee's Drive-In.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in France?
Royale with cheese.
If you're familiar with the drive-in atmosphere found at restaurants like Sonic, then this next entry will be right up your alley. Dee's Drive-In was the creation of D. Frederick Anderson, a humble hamburger salesman who sold his product out of a small shop that he referred to as the Ute Hamburger Shop.
Isn't this great, Mr. Krabs?
After visiting California on vacation and seeing the popularity of drive-in fast food, Dee decided to return home and try his hand at the business. Dee's Drive-In opened in 1954, less than a year after his vacation to the Golden State. The shop was an instant success. At its height, the chain boasted 53 separate locations all around the country. Dee's Drive-In remained on top for about 2 decades before the company decided to sell a majority of their stores to competitor Hardee's. Even though these stores are no longer around, they laid the groundwork for much of the fast food infrastructure that we see today.
You ordered a small chicken burger meal? What are you doing, man? You got bigger tits than my mum.
Gino's Burgers and Chicken.
Your destiny is to work at a fast food joint next to a strip club.
Yes.
Founded in Baltimore, Maryland in 1957, this next entry happens to be one of the most beloved and dearly missed chains. Gino's Burgers and Chicken was the brainchild of Gino Marchetti and Alan Ameche, who were once players for the Baltimore Colts. They decided that they would try to translate their luck on the football field to success in the fast food industry. Just like the name suggests, this chain wouldn't be satisfied offering only standard menu items like hamburgers and fries. They decided to throw fried chicken into the mix for good measure.
Here, have a breast. Delicious.
For about a decade, natives of the Baltimore and D.C. area called the chain an institution as people flocked to the franchise, hoping to get their hands on what Gino's was serving. In 1967, the brand decided to merge with the famous Tops Diner, of which most were converted to Gino's outlets. They rode this wave of success and increased influence until 1982, when the company would go defunct and close their last store. Today, it's fairly common to see celebrity chefs and influencers open restaurants, but Gino's was perhaps the earliest and most successful of its time.
Thank you.
First time here? Well, you don't need a knife and fork to hit that subscribe button, so go ahead and smash it. Thanks. White Tower.
White Castle should be right around the corner.
What the hell's going on, Kumar?
What comes to mind when you hear the name White Tower? Is it perhaps a similarly named fast food restaurant that was made famous by their sliders? If this sounds like deja vu, let us explain. White Tower was a fledgling fast food chain that chose to piggyback off of the success of their competitor, White Castle. This becomes apparent when you take a look at White Tower's menu and see the striking similarities to the slider superstar. The likeness was so uncanny that in 1929, White Castle sued White Tower for unfair competition. In return, White Tower returned the gesture in a countersuit. It was a regular slider standoff.
A real Mexican standoff here, boys.
Whoa! All this talk of double cross is making me hungry.
The case dragged on for some time before the court declared in favor of White Castle and declared that White Tower terminate its use of similar design and trademark. This wouldn't stop the chain, however, and White Tower would go on to enjoy reasonable success in the shadow of its predecessor. At their peak, White Tower boasted 200 stores. But alas, a steady decline began in the 60s. It turned out that most people were going to White Castle, so stores began to close over the decades before the last privately franchised White Tower closed their doors in 2022 due to a fire. White Tower fought a long and hard fight against insurmountable odds, but even after the courts ruled against them, they continued on. We salute you, White Tower.
We salute the rank, not the man.
Delights.
Yeah, can I get a burger with 4 slices of cheese?
A lot of great restaurants have their roots in the South, but none of them have left quite as big of an impact as Delights. Delights was a small fast food joint founded in Georgia by Doug Shelley and Jeffrey Miller. Their menu emphasized healthy eating, and they constructed their hamburgers with lean beef and low-calorie options. Half of a century before the nutrition wave would sweep across the U.S. Along with the usual fare of burgers and fries, Delights also offered options like salads and frozen yogurt for those with a sweet tooth. Towards the pinnacle of their success, Delights grew to around 100 locations, branching out from their Georgia flagship outlet. Unfortunately, even with a die-hard fan base behind them, Delights realized that they couldn't keep their doors open in a changing restaurant landscape. In 1987, after a long declaration of Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Delights went silent and their kitchens cooled.
Monopoly, you go bankrupt, you lose.
You don't go by Monopoly, man.
Even though Delights only enjoyed a brief moment in the spotlight, they made their mark on the fast food space.
Make your mark.
Minnie Pearl's Chicken.
How'd you find me? It's the only chicken and waffle place in all of Holland.
Minnie Pearl was the toast of the town in 1951. If you haven't heard of her, here's the 411. Born Sarah Ophelia Colley Cannon, or as the rest of the world knew her, Minnie, she was a famous comedian and performer. In Nashville, Tennessee, fewer venues are more highly coveted than the Grand Ole Opry, and Minnie Pearl was famous for making the place roar. Minnie enjoyed a lot of success in her early career, to the point that people were approaching her with business deals all the time. In the late 60s, two brothers persuaded Minnie and another singer, Mahalia Jackson, to lend their likeness to a fried chicken chain. Naturally, the pair said yes. Several years later, the chain of fried chicken restaurants was worth an estimated $60 million. You'd think that Minnie, Mahalia, and the two brothers would be in hog heaven, but there was trouble brewing in paradise. It turns out that the people buying these franchises had nothing to work with, as the brothers had not formulated a concrete recipe for their fried chicken, which was now attached to the name of one of the most popular people in America. As a result, these offshoot franchises began to wither and die without any help from the overseeing brothers. In the mid and late 60s, the restaurants began to fail and the value of the company's stock began to plummet. Minnie noticed the writing on the wall, and while she was appalled to have her name attached to such a disaster, she sold her stock, resulting in a nice profit. Many people have tried to dip their toes into the deep fryer that is the fast food chicken game, but few come out unscathed, and Minnie Pearl was no different.
You fail.
Henry's Hamburgers.
You want to dip a size your meal for a quarter more?
Want me to punch-size your face for free?
The Windy City has given us many contributions to the culinary arts, and many celebrity chefs have cut their teeth in kitchens around the town. Founded in 1954, Henry's is no exception to this rule. The parent company of Bressler's Ice Cream laid the groundwork in terms of funding, and so all that was left to do was make a mark with the customers. Henry's sold many of the familiar favorites of the time, like burgers and fries, but also leaned heavily into ice cream, akin to Dairy Queen or the ever-famous Tasty Freeze. It took no time at all for this Chicagoland food spot to rise to culinary fame. Less than 2 years later, the chain had grown to around 50 locations, and by the early 60s, customers could visit over 200 locations. Henry's was also one of the first fast food empires to lean heavily into marketing, with catchy marketing slogans like, "I'm hungry for a Henry's," and 10 burgers for a buck. While these catchy phrases are nice and all, can we just slow down and enjoy the thought of 10 hamburgers for $1? That's what dreams are made of. Sources are iffy as to why, but around the turn of the decade, franchises began closing all over the Chicago area and greater region. As quickly as they rose, Henry's was destined to fall. While they aren't technically closed for good, you'll have to travel all the way to Benton Harbor, Michigan if you want to get a taste of what Henry was offering all those years ago. Burger Chef.
Why are there 2 sets of prices?
One's the Emmy winner discount.
Indiana may be better known for college basketball and the Indy 500, but the state is also a contributor in some way to the fast food universe with this next entry. Burger Chef was an American fast food chain that was founded in 1954 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Frank and Donald Thomas were just coming out of their successfully filed patent for the world's first flame broiler and decided that they would put this new invention to use. Less than 3 years later, the first Burger Chef opened its doors. This little chain enjoyed a meteoric rise to stardom with their unique menu and proprietary way of preparing burgers. What made this little chain so popular was their desire to focus on smaller towns and communities to serve a larger geographic sample, as opposed to moving into a large population center and trying to corner the market. Customers saw their intentions and responded in kind by patronizing the fast food icon.
Gosh, Burger Chef, it's Wolfburger the werewolf!
Just before the 1970s rolled in, the company was overseeing expansion into international markets. For the next decade, the company rested on their laurels, not making any advances, but not shrinking either. As a result, the original company members decided to sell off their interests to a company that also owned the fast food chain Hardee's. Many of the Burger Chef outlets that had set up shop in small towns were either torn down or converted, but it's hard not to recognize the impact that this burger chain had. In their own time, they rivaled the empire of McDonald's, and that's saying something. Lums.
Someone drove a hot dog-shaped car through the window!
Whoever did this, just confess!
Branching out from the normal burger chains, Lums is an American institution that originated in Miami Beach, Florida, and served steamed hot dogs for over 25 years. From 1956 until 1982, Lums stood by the promise of the best hot dogs in the Miami area, and during that entire stint, lifelong fans of the dogs chose to visit the store. Most recently featured in the movie The Irishman by Martin Scorsese, this was a no-fuss, no-muss type of establishment.
The secret is they steamed them in beer. There ain't a better hot dog in America.
Customers were expected to know what they wanted because the kitchen worked fast. When the 80s dawned, financial problems beset the Miami icon, and most of the franchises were forced to close. Lum's original location remained open for a few years after the fact, but they too were forced to close their doors in 1983. What makes fast food great? Well, in the case of all of these restaurants, now it's only the memories surrounding these cherished chains. They may be gone, but not forgotten.
Oh! Damn you, Roger! Damn it!
We're always open 24/7, so tap or click another great video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell. And hey, leave us a comment.